and welcome everybody. How are you feeling today? It is my privilege to be with you. As Paul said, I have been traveling the country and attending mass organizing meetings and speaking about the historic nationwide mobilization November 5th in Washington, D.C. to raise the demand. Trump must go now, and to kick off a sustained, non-violent struggle across this country and centered in Washington, D.C. that does not stop until we win that demand. Now, I have been to Los Angeles, the Bay Area, D.C., New York. We've had organizing meetings in Cleveland and Houston and other cities that are being planned this weekend. But as Paul said, I knew I was coming to Chicago. But when we made this plan, it was not yet ground zero in the way it is. And so it is an honor to be with you here in Chicago today. It is also shocking to be here. It is infuriating to be here. And it is chilling to be here. Others have spoken about this, but just a couple days ago, U.S. military-style invasion of a predominantly black residential community targeting immigrants and black people indiscriminately. Terror. Black Hawk military helicopters, people shaken awake in the middle of the night. There are buildings literally rumbling, and every single resident dragged out in zip ties, chained together. I heard somebody describe the scene of the zip-tied Latinos and Latino babies and the zip-tied black people and black babies, and said that the zip-tied children and black people tied together, one after the other, reminded them of slave coffles. Think about that. That is what Trump has always meant when he says, make America great again. Yeah. There has been and there is a direct line from the Confederacy to the Trump regime of today, to the anti-immigrant terror, to the hatred of women and LGBT people, to the assault on science and reason and medicine, the planet, to all of it. And it is up to us and people like us across this country to rise in a way that has never been done in an unprecedented struggle to drive this regime out. This is why this call for November 5th, the call for the fall of the Trump fascist regime, begins with these words. It says, fascism is not a looming threat. It is upon us now. Humanity's only choice, only hope, is for the decent people of this country to rise in our millions. We cannot wait for future and rigged elections. We must drive this fascist regime from power. Beginning November 5th, the one-year anniversary of Trump's re-election, flood D.C. in non-violent protest. Surround the White House. Surround the Capitol. Surround the illegitimate fascist-packed Supreme Court. Come back again and again across the country, refuse to comply. Every person of conscience, millions of us together, grind the machinery of this fascist regime to a halt and do not stop.
No.
Do not stop. Until the Trump regime is removed from power. This is what we must understand, sisters and brothers and beautiful people. The regime must be removed. It is beautiful, it is righteous, and I'll get into this. And we have seen so many people protest, so many people uprise, so many people speak out. It shows our potential power. But unless and until this regime is removed, unless it is out of power, until that is won, it will regroup. As Dr. Ali said, fascism has no limits. It will regroup. It will bulldoze over us. It will assault and advance on so many fronts at once you cannot keep up. And we see it. We have to drive them out. So these, as I said, are the opening words of this call for this historic mobilization, November 5th in Washington, D.C. And today I'm going to talk about why this is what we must do and how this can succeed. And then we're going to spend the time together getting organized so that we can go from 75, 100 people in a church basement here and gatherings like this in a few cities around the country to a mass organization that wakes up and moves the tens of millions who do not want Trump's nightmare to come with us to do so. Talk about it together, and then we're going to break into groups, roll up our sleeves, and get to work making plans. But I'm going to go further on what this vision is. I want to read more from this call. Now, usually I have a podium, so bear with me. It says, fascism, a different form of brutal rule. This is important to understand. This is why the regime must be removed. What do we mean by fascism? The call again makes clear. It says the Trump fascist regime is shredding the rule of law, making a mockery of due process, illegitimately deploying U.S. military on U.S. soil, disappearing immigrants and other brown-skinned people, whether or not they have papers, into brutal concentration camps, aggressively resurrecting genocidal white supremacy, reversing the gains not only of the 1960s, but even of the Civil War and Reconstruction. Enslaving women to the brutality and suffocation of forced motherhood. Erasing LGBT people. Violating international law. Trampling democratic rights. Assaulting and threatening politicians and judges. Paving the way for unbound terror against the masses of regular people. Accelerating climate collapse, cutting science and medicine, costing millions of lives, depleting humanity's store of knowledge, destroying truth, drowning out reason, subjugating the arts to fascist cruelty and conformity, targeting everything that is moral, decent, and good, all at the whim of a deranged fascist tyrant. This again, I'm reading from this call. All of this, it was written 2 months ago, all of this is true. And it's accelerating every day. As we've talked about right here in Chicago, it's ground zero right now, but I wish I could say it's the only ground zero. They're sending troops into Portland. A judge said, no, you can't send the National Guard. Just a few hours later, Trump says, well, I'll take the National Guard from California and send them in instead. They're going into Memphis. They're going across this country at a pace that is dizzying, terrorizing people, normalizing things that even a month ago you thought you'd never see. Think where this will be in another month if it's not stopped. 3 months, 4 months. It's a nightmare. I think of the resident who said in the South Shore, where's your humanity? Looking at the children zip-tied. And the ICE agent or whoever they were saying, fuck those children. Yeah. Think of what this says. This is who's being given backing. Or Christy Nolan, who says we're going to send ICE into the NFL because we want to keep people safe. We got to keep people. Well, obviously, she's not talking about black people or Latino people or people who've spoken out against that. To them, these are not people. Trump uses that phrase all the time, the real Americans. This is a section of society who he deems worthy of rights and protection, and everybody else, as he said at Charlie Kirk's memorial, I don't wish what's best for my enemy. I don't care about them. I hate them. I want what's bad for them. This is what he's bringing, retribution, vengeance, and revenge, frankly, against every advance that's been won over the last 150 years of people standing up and fighting against segregation. People standing up and fighting against the enslavement of women and the brutality and suffocation of LGBT people. Everything that people stood up against and made advances, they want revenge against. And not just a dragging society back, but a cruel punishment. And they are deadly serious and they are moving very fast. You know, right after Charlie Kirk was assassinated, we made clear immediately that this was very wrong. And it was very harmful, and no one should celebrate or cheer what was done to him. But at the same time, it was immediately clear that Trump and the MAGA regime was going to seize on this to accelerate their fascist juggernaut. And immediately you did hear people in the MAGA regime start to talk openly about the assassination of Charlie Kirk as their Reichstag fire moment. Now I want us to think about this. If you don't know, the Reichstag was the main government building in Germany in the 1930s. And in 1933, in February, this is shortly after Hitler came to power, the Reichstag building was set on fire. Now historians have argued about who actually set the fire. And many believe, for good reason, that it was most likely set by the Nazis themselves. But what is beyond dispute, what has never been argued, what is openly there in the main lesson to learn from this period, was that Hitler and the Nazis seized on the fire to declare a national state of emergency and to suspend the rights of the people. They shut down the free press. They criminalized opposition parties. They carried out raids and started to disappear and torture the communists first. This was the beginning of the concentration camps. And it was a major leap toward the path that led to the towering crime in all of world history, of the Holocaust and mass murder of 6 million Jews, and of the mass murder of communists and Roma people, and all the nightmare that led ultimately to tens of millions of deaths in World War II. Now think about it. For the fascists to openly compare this assassination to their Reichstag fire moment, the revolutionary leader Bob Baking, who I follow, put out a social media message shortly after this where he observed, quote, and declaring that this is their Reichstag fire, these Trump MAGA fascist forces are openly identifying with the Nazis, openly proclaiming that they are indeed fascists. You know, for years, for generations, people all over the world have looked at the Holocaust and said, never again, learn the lessons. And here are these fascists openly looking at the legacy of the Holocaust to learn the lessons to carry out the same kind of atrocities here. We should take this very seriously. And in the wake of this assassination, they have gone on their rampage. They put the military in cities like this one. Trump signed an executive order classifying the intentionally vague catch-all category of Antifa as a domestic terrorist, a rubric under which to go after anybody they want. He did another executive memo where he's bringing the death penalty back to D.C. He did an executive memo where he targeted all kinds of opposition and dissent as terrorism and domestic terrorism. This is accelerating. And it comes on top of the expansion of ICE, who we have seen already. They're lawless, unaccountable, masked, armed agents who violate rights and are answerable to nobody but Trump and his fascist thugs. With a budget bigger than most militaries in the world, bigger than the Marines, and Steve Bannon is already talking about deploying them to polling stations in 2026. This is a regime that does not intend on ever letting go of the levers of power. So I want to return to what's said in this call, and I'm going to be reading more from this call because I want us to appreciate the power of what's written in this and how powerful this is as an organizing tool for when we get organizing. It says, hopes of waiting this out are illusion. Every accommodation only fuels Trump's demand for ever more slavish submission. Every capitulation by universities, by law firms and other agencies only feeds the regime's ravenous hunger to remake all of society in its grotesque image. The elections are way too late. Besides, no honest person can expect the tyrant who instigated and then pardoned the January 6th insurrectionists to respect an election he loses. This, too, is reality. This is why it has to be driven from power. We cannot hide from this, and we cannot let our neighbors, our loved ones, and the decent people across the country hide from this reality either. If this fascist regime is not removed from power, everything that decent people have felt they could rely on to seek justice will be brutally shut down. Every uplifting moral value will be reviled and repressed. Every sphere of society will be remade in Trump's fascist and hateful vision. And every vision and every effort to bring about a better, more just world will be violently suppressed and brutally shut down, at least for the foreseeable future. So the call also says, and this is an important concentrated two sentences. It says the Trump fascist regime is illegitimate. What it is demanding we become is unconscionable. At every level of society, in every institution, tens of millions of us know this in our bones. And I want to break down what it is saying here because it's important. A lot of people agree. We hate Trump. We don't like what he's doing. But we have to wait till the next election. We're saying no. And a lot of the reason why people think they need to wait is they think Trump is legitimate. And they say, well, he was voted for, so that makes him the legitimate president. No. And the no for two reasons. First of all, fascism is never legitimate.
Never. Yeah.
No election, fair or fraudulent, can legitimize fascism. And the second reason is even if you are inclined to grant some claim to legitimacy to Trump because he was voted in, he surrendered even that claim the moment he started using his constitutionally obtained power to systematically dismantle the constitutional order.
That's right.
He surrendered even that claim to legitimacy. There's nothing legitimate about fascism and this fascist regime. So then what's the significance of the statement that there are people at every level of society and in every institution, including the ruling institutions, who feel in their bones that what Trump is demanding of us is unconscionable? This points to this fact and the reason why it is actually possible to drive Trump from power. Our strategy is not just if you get enough people making a demand, somebody's going to listen. There's a lot of people in power who won't listen. But we are saying, look, there's divisions at every level of society, including in the ruling institutions. This call talks about the fact that there have been millions and millions of us in the base of society who protested. Over 5 million on No King's Day. This is powerful. We had millions cancel their subscriptions to get Jimmy Kimmel back on air, and people protested. This is very important.
Yeah.
We've seen people pour into the streets in Portland and here in Chicago to stand up against the violations of people's rights in their lives by ICE. This is very important. We saw people stand up to the unjust, illegitimate military occupation of Los Angeles. Very important. We see again and again that people in their millions do not like this. We see the potential power. But then this is pointing to divisions also at the top of society. And here I want to read something from a really important social media message, a major message from the revolutionary leader Bob Avakian. And I want to note that there are people in this movement who think in many different viewpoints, different perspectives, we come together. I think this is an important message from this revolutionary leader that speaks to the strategic vision of how the regime could be removed. And he's somebody who's been ahead of the curve for decades. So I want to read this, and it's pretty concentrated. He says, there are many people and forces within the ruling institutions, or people with strong ties and potentially important influence within those institutions, who are very deeply troubled by, or even strongly opposed to how they see the actions of the Trump fascist regime, quote, violating the Constitution and the law, destroying our great American experiment in democracy, end quote, and, quote, seriously undermining and damaging our country's standing in the world, end quote. Bob Avakian goes on to say, as a revolutionary communist who has developed a new communism as a whole new framework for human emancipation, I have a fundamentally different understanding of the nature of the system that rules in this country and its role in the world. But at the same time, I have a clear sense of the very real difference it makes in a profoundly terrible way when there is not even a pretense of democracy and when basic rights are openly trampled on. In light of the urgent need to defeat and remove the Trump regime that is enforcing an undisguised fascist dictatorship, and the crucial importance of uniting all who can be united to drive out this regime, I, again Bob Avakian, recognize the particularly important role that such people and forces with ties and influence in the key institutions could play in regard to this urgent need. I also recognize that they will only feel compelled able to play this role if there is, in fact, a kind of massive political earthquake from below that can be brought about by the millions taking up the call for refuse fascism. And in this way, moving to create the kind of political crisis where this political earthquake from below, in combination with the heightening divisions within the dominant and ruling institutions, could lead to the removal of the Trump fascist regime. So this is getting at dynamics from the bottom, the people rising up, interacting with very sharp divisions among the rulers and among people within every major institution in society and in the halls of power. And this is why it is actually possible for a mass nonviolent struggle to create the conditions where Trump is not able to impose his fascist program, he's not able to implement what he wants to do, and he's not even able to hold on to the reins of power, where other forces will move to remove him from power. So this is describing the process and why it's possible. But I want to be clear. Nothing short of removing the regime, nothing short of what Refuse Fascism has called for and is mobilizing on November 5th, and which is open to and needs participation from everybody possible. Nothing short of that can achieve this. And I want you to picture the difference it makes to have millions of people in the Capitol converging in a way that cannot be hidden from the people of the world, in a way that rips off the claim of legitimacy away from Trump and lets the whole world see how he is despised and rejected by his population. I want you to think about the strength and the heart and the inspiration that will give to the tens of millions more across this country who right now are afraid, don't know what they should do, but they should come out and join us, whether in their small towns, where they are, or by coming to D.C. after us. I want you to think about how this would change. Who has the initiative? Within every university board who's trying to decide, do we capitulate or do we fight? Within all the students who are trying to decide, do we stand back because our peer is being taken away? And if we speak up, it might be us next, or do we all flood in and say we have their back? I want you to think about how that realigns what's going on within every institution, including those who've sworn an oath to the Constitution in the armed forces and elsewhere, not to a tyrant violating the Constitution. Think about what starts to change when you have that political earthquake from below. It has to be massive, it has to be in D.C., it has to be all at once, and then it has to unloose and set forward a process that doesn't stop until we see it all the way through and Trump is removed.
Yeah.
Organize. We have 1 month. We have people working on this around the country. But I am not going to surprise any of you to say that we are not on track to bring the millions we need. We're not yet there. Most people who need to be part of this don't even know about it yet. But we are not in normal times. We're in times when things are moving very fast and millions are being called into motion rapidly. So there is actually a profound basis for things to change dramatically, not only negatively, but also positively. I want to focus on 4 key ways that when we get to the organizing, we are going to zero in on. One thing is this call for November 5th. I've been reading from it. If you study this call, what's in it, you can make the argument why the regime must go and how we make it happen. If you spread this, and if we spread it by the hundreds of thousands, hand to hand, we can reach people with the argument, where to be, why to be there, what's at stake. This has the stakes and what it will take. This is our #1 organizing tool. And we need it online. We need November 5th being chalked on sidewalks. We need stickers on the walls, posters everywhere. We need to get this known. That's #1. Just getting the message out. D.C., November 5th, Trump must go. Number 2, we have to take this November 5th mobilization to organized forces, organizations and organized forces. Every indivisible chapter needs to be invited. Every 50-51 chapter needs to be invited. Every immigrant rights group needs to be invited. Every religious social justice group needs to be invited. We need to go out to student groups. People here, we're going to have a breakout to get together and figure out how do we reach out systematically to every organization, not to join our thing, but because this is the only way. It's a time when we all have to come together and make our voices together accomplish something that none of us can do on our own. And we also need to take up No Kings Day too. October 18th, here and across the country, needs to be twice as big as the first one. And it needs to build momentum.
Yeah.
Build momentum towards November 5th. So the second thing is reaching out to organizations, systematically and with big arms, learning to unite and not divide towards a higher good. The third thing is it's going to take an incredible amount of resources and funds to make this happen. We need people to donate generously and help fundraise. From the grassroots, thousands of small donations, and people who can give serious major donations. It is going to be for 1 million people. You need 3,000 porta potties. Think about how much that costs. You need transportation. You need advertising. You need permits. You need a lot of logistics. And we in the national office, it takes funds. This is a way to bring people into the movement, for them to support it and for them to make it go. So that's the third thing. And the fourth thing is you got to make your plans to be in D.C. We got to get everybody we know to be in D.C. November 5th. Come, stay as long as you can. Come late if you must, but get to D.C. November 5th, it needs to be a massive outpouring. So each of us here today should make those plans. I want to end, and we'll get into talking about this when we get into the breakouts. But I want to end by bringing us back to what everybody has spoken about. What Balthasar spoke about with the raids that are unending right now, Dr. Ali and others, the professor. I mean, there was a lot that people brought out. And there's a lot that I spoke about what we're actually facing, what's really happening, and where things are headed if we do not change everything. And I want to say, not every generation lives through a time as consequential as this one. We are doing something and calling for something nonviolent, I want to be clear, but what we are facing right now is every bit as consequential as the generation that lived through the Civil War and the epic battle to abolish slavery in this country. What we are facing is every bit as consequential as the generation that lived through the rise of Nazi Germany and Hitler. And we look back at people who lived through these historic turning points. Most people don't, but we look back at the people who lived through those historic turning points and we judge them. Some by what they rose to, the heroism, the courage, and the sacrifice that really mattered, and some for the shame that are the darkest chapters in human history. We are going to be judged by how we live through this time, each of us. And we need to answer this, not just with our private opposition and our concerns, but with our collective action in public, courage demonstrated in a way that can change things, taking up the one mass mobilization and cry that meets the challenge of the day, which is that Trump must be removed and we all have to go to D.C. together to make it happen.
Yeah.
The very last lines of this call say, history is filled with examples where people who had right on their side fought against tremendous odds and were victorious. It is also filled with examples where people passively hoped to wait it out only to get swallowed up by a nightmare beyond what they ever imagined. The future is unwritten,